In 1999, David Foster Wallace wrote a lengthy review on a book titled Dictionary of Modern American Usage. And as it goes, the author of the book, Bryan Garner, was moved by the review so much that he later wrote of it, "It changed my literary life in ways that a book review rarely can." So naturally, the two writers struck up an email correspondence that eventually evolved into a close friendship. And out of that friendship came a special meeting in a Los Angeles hotel room 7 years later, a physical interview conducted by Mr. Garner on David Foster Wallace, which left a series of conversations to be published in 2008, the same year of Wallace's tragic death. The book was titled Quack This Way: David Foster Wallace and Bryan A. Garner Talk Language and Writing. And as the name infers, it spans many of Mr. Wallace's ideas on writing, self-improvement, and how to become an authentic individual. But for the purpose of this video, we'll be focusing on David Foster Wallace's advice on how to be a good writer. And as it happens, good writing was something that Garner wanted to clarify right out of the gate, asking David Foster Wallace to begin by defining what good writing is, to which he responded, "In the broadest possible sense, writing well means to communicate clearly and interestingly, and in a way that feels alive to the reader, where there's some kind of relationship between the writer and the reader, even though it's mediated by some kind of text. There's an electricity about it." And so here are David Foster Wallace's 5 insightful tips on how to become a good writer. Number 1, get a usage dictionary. David Foster Wallace said, "I urge my students to get a usage dictionary. To recognize that you need a usage dictionary, you have to be paying a level of attention to your own writing that very few people are doing. A usage dictionary is like a linguistic hard drive. For me, the big trio is a big dictionary, a usage dictionary, a thesaurus. Only because I cannot retain and move nimbly around in enough of the language not to need these extra sources. As a teacher, about 90% of my job is getting the students to understand why they might need one." And if you're confused as to what a usage dictionary is as opposed to a standard dictionary, like a Webster's New World, a standard dictionary will give you lexical information. It will tell you what words mean, whereas a usage dictionary will give you advice on how, when, or if you should use a word in a certain context. Also, if you want to know the reason for why, say, infer and imply are often confused, or how they're evolving over time, as they in fact are, a usage dictionary will give you that information. Mr. Wallace also shares why you should consider keeping a usage dictionary in your bathroom. A usage dictionary is one of those great bathroom books of all time, because it has the appeal of trivia. The entries are for the most part brief, and you end up within 48 hours, due to that weird psychological effect, actually drawing on exactly what you learned in some weird coincidental way. Number 2, a good opener never fails. David Foster Wallace said, "A good opener, first and foremost, fails to repel. Rather, it's interesting and engaging. It lays out the terms of an argument and, in my opinion, should also in some way imply the stakes. If one did it deftly, one could in a one-paragraph opening grab the reader, state the terms of the argument, and state the motivation for the argument. I imagine most good argumentative stuff that I've read, you could boil that down to the opener." Number 3, the reader cannot read your mind. And I'll preface this by saying that it's this lesson that was the most important for him to communicate to his students. He said, "In my experience with students, talented students of writing, the most important thing for them to remember is that someone who is not them and cannot read their mind is going to have to read this. In order to write effectively, you don't pretend it's a letter to some individual you know, but you never forget that what you're engaged in is a communication to another human being. The bromide associated with this is that the reader cannot read your mind. That would be the biggest one." After this, he gives a close second to the importance of paying attention to the structure of your writing. He said probably the second biggest lesson is learning to pay attention in different ways. Not just reading a lot, but paying attention to the way the sentences are put together, the clauses are joined, the way the sentences go to make up a paragraph. Number 4, assume the reader is smart. David Foster Wallace said, "Regardless of whom you're writing for, or what you think about the current debased state of the English language, right, in which the president says things that would embarrass a junior high school student, the fact remains that the average person you're writing for is an acute, sensitive, attentive, sophisticated reader who will appreciate adroitness, precision, economy, and clarity. Not always, but I think the vast majority of the time." And number 5, punctuate to process, not pronounce. David Foster Wallace said, "Reading is a very strange thing. We get talked to about it and talk explicitly about it in first grade and second grade and third grade, and then it all devolves into interpretation. But when you think about what's going on when you read, you're processing information at an incredible rate. One measure of how good the writing is how little effort it requires for the reader to track what's going on. For example, I am not an absolute believer in standard punctuation at all times. But one thing that's often a big shock to my students is that punctuation isn't merely a matter of pacing or how you would read something out loud. These marks are in fact cues to the reader for how very quickly to organize the various phrases and clauses of the sentence so that the sentence as a whole makes sense. One of the things that really good writing does is that it's able to get across massive amounts of information and various favorable impressions of the communicator with minimal effort on part of the reader. That's why people use terms like flow or effortless to describe writing that they regard as really superb. They're not saying effortless in terms of it didn't seem like the writer spent any work. It simply requires no effort to read it. The same way listening to an incredible storyteller talk out loud requires no effort to pay attention. Whereas when you're bored, you're conscious of how much effort is required to pay attention. Well, that wraps up this video, guys. Thank you for watching. Also, if you have your own tip or trick in writing that has helped you in your own writing journey, please feel free to share that in the comment section below. I would personally like to know, and I'm sure others would too. Otherwise, until the next one.